Evolution is the process by which heritable characteristics of biological populations change over successive generations. These heritable characteristics are phenotypic expressions of genes that are transferred from original to offspring during reproduction. The theory of evolution by natural selection is, to date, the best explanation of the origin and diversification of species on Earth. Not only is it highly supported by all lines of evidence, it is an emergent phenomena of any system with the properties of gradations in reproductive success and random mutation. Now, how does evolution work? In the most concise way, evolution is a set of certain phenomena and processes. So first of all, life forms reproduce, right, and have a tendency, therefore, to become more numerous. Factors such as predation and competition work against the survival of individuals. And each offspring differs from their parent or parents in minor random ways. If these differences are beneficial, the offspring is more likely to survive and reproduce. This makes it likely that more offspring in the next generation will have beneficial differences and fewer will have detrimental differences. Now, these are small changes, but these differences accumulate over generations, resulting in changes within the population over, long periods of time. And even over longer periods of time, these populations can split and branch off into new species. Now, these processes, collectively known as evolution, are responsible for the many diverse life forms we see in the world. Now, what is the origin of life what is the history of life according to evolution? Well, this is the primary field of study by paleobiologists. And according to that, so the age of the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. Life emerged on the Earth no later than 3.5 billion years ago, soon after the geological crust started to solidify. Evolution does not attempt to explain the origin of life. Rather, what it does is that it explains how the earliest life forms evolved into the complex ecosystems that we see today. Life probably started as random chemical reactions in the turbulent Earth ocean near volcanic events that created self-replicating RNA. These RNA later reproduced and evolved more complex DNA and eventually cells. Most of the history of life, the life was single-celled. However, about 1 billion years ago, the first evidence for multicellular life was discovered. Soon after this occurred the Cambrian explosion. This was a period when immense numbers of new species evolved and intense diversification was observed. Most major animal phyla appeared in the fossil record during this time. Now, what is the evidence for evolution? Well, the evidence for evolution is staggering. The modern understanding of evolution began in 1859 with the book On the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. Concurrently, Gregor Mendel's work with plants helped to explain the hereditary patterns of genetics. Fossil discoveries in paleontology are also a big reason to support evolution. So let's look at the fossil record. Fossils provide evidence that accumulated changes in organisms over long periods of time have led to the diverse forms of life we see today. In sedimentary rock records, each layer of depth contains a specific group of fossils, the deeper layers containing older and simpler life forms. By looking at fossils, it is possible to see the slow and steady progression of life's evolution. For example, Archaeopteryx, an ancient organism that had the distinct characteristics of a reptile and of birds, showing the splitting off between these species and a common ancestor of these species too. Taxonomy. So, strong evidence for evolution comes from analyzing structures in different species that no longer perform the same task but would share a similar structure. Such designs make little sense if evolved separately. Evolution explains these structures by proposing these species came from a common ancestor, which slowly changed these structures over evolution. Embryology. Studying the embryos of different species provides evidence for a common ancestor between the two that would be less obvious in their adult forms. For example, nearly all vertebrates look similar in the very beginning of development. Later, humans and other primates look similar in instances like the presence of a tail. So, So pretty much all species look the same, right, at the very beginning of the embryo stages, right? And then over time, during the development of the embryo, it splits off and everything starts becoming less and less similar. Vestigial structures. So vestigial structures are structures that previously played an important role but now do not do anything. For example, there is no explanation for the appendix without evolution. The appendix was originally supposed to help digest tree bark. The explanation for the appendix is that it previously served a purpose that is no longer needed. So evolution is the only way to explain these vestigial structures because it's saying that it used to serve a purpose, but during evolution it is no longer necessary. In molecular biology, finally, every living organism contains DNA which carries their genetic information. If two organisms are closely related, their DNA will be very similar. For example, comparing chimpanzees with gorillas and humans show that there is as much as 96% similarity between the DNA of humans and chimps. Now, evolution is not a perfect theory. There are limitations. The biggest unsolved problem in biology is the origin of life at all. While evolution does explain the subsequent evolution and diversification of life, it cannot explain where it comes from at all. However, evolution does not attempt to do that. It just attempts to describe, once you have life, how that develops. Now, there are alternatives to evolution, such as, first of all, creationism. Creationism claims that evolution never happened, and that all the features and beautiful characteristics of the universe and living beings were created expressly by God, not by random chance. Now, the evidence for this is that it is able to explain the origin of life, something that evolution can't do. However, it does have a lack of evidence because it cannot explain the fossil record, the similarities found in taxonomy, the relationship between species and embryo, the purpose of vestigial structures, or the components of DNA and genes. Another alternative, a softer form of this alternative, is intelligent design. Intelligent design claims that certain features of the universe and of living things are best explained by an intelligent cause, not an undirected process such as natural selection. This claims that certain complex parts of organisms could not have evolved with small gradual changes and instead needed to have been made all at once. This is called irreducible complexity. For example, intelligent design proponents claim that the human eye and shoulder joint could not be explained by evolution alone. However, it's important to not confuse intelligent design and creationism. Intelligent design is an effort to describe whether the apparent design is genuine design or the product of random selection. Intelligent design does not claim that evolution didn't happen like creationism. Rather, evolution was initiated by a divine being and helped along the way to create humanity and the rest of the species of Earth. Now, the evidence for this is similar to that of creationism in that it is able to explain the origin of life, which is a divine maker, and it's also able to explain the same things that evolution can explain by saying, well, evolution did those things, and was simply helped along the way by a designer. Now, when discussing the different pros and cons of each of these theories, we need to consider what is probable or not. So, creationism does not seem to be able to explain the species of life because it doesn't explain any of the evidence. It cannot explain the fossil record or the similarities in embryos or the structure of DNA and the similarities between the DNA of different species. And when we start talking about intelligent design, we realize that a problem with intelligent design is that many of the things that intelligent design claims can't be described by evolution, such as the human eye can be. There is ways to have a gradual development of something as complicated as the human eye. Over time, it doesn't have to be made all at once. But there is the issue that evolution cannot explain how all life got started in the first place, which is something intelligent design and creationism can do. But this isn't a problem because because evolution does not even attempt to explain the origin of life. Evolution simply describes what happens once you have life and the diversification that happens there. Additionally, and given the massive amount of evidence that evolution has, it puts it above the others as the most sturdy scientific theory to base the diversification of life on. In addition, it makes intuitive sense too, because biological evolution is not just a phenomena of life on Earth. Biological evolution comes with only two requirements. All that you need to have evolution is some kind of environmental pressure, you need reproduction, and you need random mutation that happens in this reproduction. That's all you need. Anywhere in the universe where you would have those three things, you will get evolution as a natural consequence of competition, first of all, and also the ability to create the efficiency of making more offspring. So that's why evolution stands above the others as the most likely scientific theory